Our final speaker for this session is Matthew L. Bowen, who's now coming to the fore. Matthew was raised in Orem, Utah, and graduated from Brigham Young University. He holds a PhD in biblical studies from the Catholic University of America in Washington, D.C., and is currently a professor, recent promotion, in religious education at Brigham Young University, Hawaii. He was also the author of Name as Keyword, collected essays on onomastic wordplay in the temple and Mormon scripture, which I'd recommend to any of you who's interested in this topic. Brother, I say Brother Rensburg. I'll call you brother. Is that all right, Gary? He's done a lot in this area, as has Scott Nagel, one of his students. And so Matt has carried that tradition, which I really appreciate. And another great book by Matt has been Ancient Names in the Book of Mormon, toward a deeper understanding of a witness of Christ. Both books are published by the Interpreter Foundation and Eborn Books. With Aaron P. Shade, he's also the co-author of The Book of Moses, From the Ancient of Days to the Latter Days. And he and his wife, the former Suzanne Blattberg, are the parents of 3 children, Zachariah, Nathan, and Adele. Matt, thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, and thanks to everybody who's had anything to do with putting together this conference, and thank you to all the presenters as well. So I'm going to be, this paper is a very long paper, so you're going to be getting the executive summary of the Reader's Digest version of it. So I'll commend to you the longer paper that will appear in the proceedings for this volume. But I think it'll be pretty clear kind of where I'm going with all of this from the examples that I'll give you here in just a minute. Okay. So the book of Genesis is largely etiological in character. While etiology abounds in the Pentateuch as a whole and occurs throughout the narrative portions of the Hebrew Bible, Genesis is particularly etiological. Michael H. Floyd states that etiology refers to stories that tell how something came to be or to have its definitive characteristics in Scripture. Such stories are typically told about names of persons and places, rites and customs, ethnic identities, and other natural phenomena. In this presentation, I'll endeavor to show how the patriarchal narratives of the Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob cycles largely revolve around onomastic etiologies that explain names in terms of sacred events. These sacred events include theophanies, the making and fulfillment of divine covenants and promises, and relatedly, divine acts and human choices that ensure the preservation and growth, the perpetuation of the family of Abraham as a covenant lineage. At least in terms of the Abraham cycle, the etiologies really begin with the name of Ishmael. You're familiar with Genesis 16:11, and the angel of the Lord said unto her, unto Hagar, I will multiply thy seed exceedingly, that it shall not be numbered for the multitude. And the angel of the Lord said unto her, behold, thou art with child, and shalt bear a son, and shall call his name Ishmael. May El hear, or El will hear, because the Lord hath heard thine affliction. The verb Shema functions as a light for it, or a lead word or guiding word throughout the narrative cycle. This really begins at the beginning of the pericope, Genesis 16:1-2. And Abram hearkened Vayishma, to the voice of Sarai, and that's sort of how it begins. And this continues to resurface through the narrative, and it's one of those terms that guides us through the narrative. And we heard last week how significant the verb Shema, or the verb to hear, is even in the book of Abraham narration of events. As for Ishmael, I have heard thee, Shematika. Behold, I have blessed him and will make him fruitful and will multiply him exceedingly. 12 princes shall he beget, and I will make him a great nation. And God heard Vaishma Elohim, the voice of the lad, and the angel of God called to Hagar out of heaven and said unto her, What aileth thee, Hagar? Fear not, for God hath heard. He Shema Elohim, the voice of the lad where he is. Sarah's words echo the meanings of the names of both Ishmael and Isaac, famously Genesis 21, 5-6. All that hear Hashemah will laugh. Yitzhak with me. Later on, and this is something that that other scholars have pointed out, that this continues even after Ishmael and Isaac are sort of formally off the stage. And Jacob obeyed Vayishma his father and his mother, and was gone to Padan Aram. And Esau, seeing that the daughters of Canaan pleased not Isaac his father, then went Esau unto Ishmael and took unto him wives which he had, Malachat, the daughter of Ishmael, Abraham's son, the sister of Nabaioth, to be his wife. Even in the Joseph story, you've got this echo. It's not an obvious one, at least from the King James translation. Come and let us sell him to the Ishmaelites, and let not our hands be upon him, for he is our brother and our flesh, and his brethren were content. Of course, the King James text obscures what's really going on there. The brothers hearkened, or the brothers listened. Vayishma'u. Another one I really love, the part of the pericope that focuses on the naming of the well, Beher Lachai Roi. And she called the name of the Lord that spake to her, this divine being, Thou God seest me, Ata El Roi, or Thou art a God of seeing, or being seen. For she said, I have here looked after him that seeth me. Ra'iti Achre Rui. Wherefore the well, La Be'er, was called Be'er Lachai Rui. Behold, it is between Kadesh and Bered. The naming of God and this location commemorates the theophany which sacralized it. God saves her life and the life of her son, enabling the fulfillment of his earlier promises of multiplication. It is now sacred space. Moshe Garciel points out this wonderful wordplay on Be'er, which is a metonymic substitute for Ain, I. So that with God seeing Hagar and God being seen ties nicely to these words that are synonyms, but one being the metonymic substitute for the other. Commenting on Hagar's designation of the Lord as El Roi, Nachum Sarna observes the vocalization of the second element occasions a marvelous ambiguity that permits the following translations of the name. God of seeing, that is, the all-seeing God. God of my seeing, that is, whom I have seen. God who sees me. Most likely, the several meanings are to be apprehended simultaneously. When God sees, it is, of course, that he shows his concern and extends his protection. When Hagar sees, she experiences God's self-manifestation. The rename, or Abraham receiving the new name in Genesis 17. And when Abram was 90 years old and 9, the Lord appeared to Abram and said unto him, I am the Almighty. God, walk before me and be thou perfect, and I will make my covenant between me and thee and will multiply thee exceedingly. Abraham responds with proskinesis, and the Lord then reaffirms his covenant with him, declaring a change of name from Abram to Abraham with an explanation for this onomastic expansion. And Abraham fell on his face, and God talked with him, saying, As for me, behold, my covenant is with thee, and thou shalt be a father of many nations. Av Hamon Goyim. Neither shall thy name be any more Abram, but thy name shall be Abraham, for a father of many nations. And Av Hamon Goyim have I made thee. Regarding the meanings of Abram and Abraham, Robert Alder writes, the meaning of both versions of the name is something like exalted father. The longer form is evidently no more than a dialectic variant of the shorter one. The real point is that Abraham should undergo a name change like a king assuming the throne. And we heard that explained nicely by Dr. Rensburg earlier and what the significance of that is. It has been proposed as he undertakes the full burden of the covenant. Malcolm Sarna notes, I will make your name great. That is, your name, Abram, will be enlarged by the addition of a syllable. The anomalous grammatical formulation supports the midrashic nature of the interpretation. It is possible that by means of wordplay, the consonants Aleph, Beit, Resh, Hey, Mem were interpreted as shorthand, called notarikon in post-biblical Hebrew, or Abir and Hamon, Abir, mighty one, and Hamon, multitude, and Goim, nations, as Ibn Ezra suggests. Sarah's name similarly changed with a hey. And Sarah said, God said unto Abraham, As for Sarai thy wife, thou shalt not call her name Sarai, but Sarah shall her name be. And I will bless her, and will give thee a son also of her. And I will bless her, and she shall be a mother of nations. Kings shall be of her. The renaming is clearly and closely tied to the promises of the Abrahamic covenant and the promise of divine multiplication. The mention of kings of peoples coming from a divinely named princess or queen brings an added divine and royal dimension. Thus, in the renaming, there may be an oblique reference to Sarah as the progenitrix of future Israel. For in Genesis 32:29, that name is said to derive from Jacob's having striven with beings divine and human. The Hebrew stem used there is sin, resh, hey. Sarn also notes, no interpretation of the matriarch's name is given, but the succeeding blessing about kings and rulers who will issue from her suggests an implicit midrash based on wordplay. For Hebrew sar, prince, or ruler, is often paired with melech, king. I think, again, Dr. Rensburg gave us a wonderful way to contextualize that in terms of the what's going on in the 10th century. Abraham desired to be a prince of peace, or a sar shalom, according to Abraham 1, verse 2. Notably, a sar, a prince or a captain, is the male counterpart to a sarah, foreshadowing the royal and divine power with which Israel and his righteous posterity will be blessed. One of the most significant ways in which we get a thematic treatment of a name within these stories is the naming of Isaac. Then Abraham fell upon his face and laughed and said in his heart, shall a child be born unto him that is 100 years old, and shall Sarah that is 90 years old bear? Note how the Joseph Smith translation handles this. Then Abraham fell on his face and rejoiced and said in his heart, there shall be a child born unto him that is 90 years old, and Sarah that is 99 years old shall bear. The JST rendering renders the verbal construction, and he laughed, the basis for the name Isaac, and he rejoiced, meaning Abraham's laughter was the laughter of pure joy. It also changes Abraham's questions to factative declarations. Note Sarah's incredulity mixed with joy. Therefore, Sarah laughed, titzak within herself, saying, after I am old, shall I have pleasure, my Lord being old also. And the Lord said unto Abraham, wherefore did Sarah laugh? Tzahaka, saying, I of a surety bear a child, which am old. Then Sarah denied, saying, I laugh not. Lo, tzahakti, for she was afraid, and he said, nay, but thou didst laugh. Tzahakt. And later on, then, in the passage we quoted earlier, Sarah notes, God hath made me to laugh, tzahok, so that all that hear me, kol shomea, again, reference to the name Ishmael, will laugh, yitzhak, with me. And here the key verb becomes identical with the form of the name. Later on, we get, Robert Alders talked about how really what's going on here is with Ishmael, there's been a lot of debate on what's really going on in this scene. I think the real takeaway is that Ishmael is sort of, in Alter's words, Isaac-ing it. And that's the major offense here. Sarah does not like what she sees, and so this leads to the expulsion of, the final expulsion of Hagar and Ishmael from the household. Isaac lives to embody the meaning in his name, and it came to pass that when he had been there a long time, that Abimelech, king of the Philistines, looked out the window and saw, and behold, Isaac, Yitzhak, was met Sahek with Rebekah, his wife. So Isaac is now Isaac-ing it. I mean, that's kind of the idea of what the narrator's trying to bring across. Beersheba, it gets a etiological treatment in terms of the key terms, Shabbat, to swear, and it's tied within these narratives to the number 7, which we'll talk about, but you can see how that works. And Abraham said, Yishbea, and Abraham reproved Abimelech because of a well, the heir of water, which Abimelech's servants had violently taken away. And then later on, same as that passage continues, you've got the repetition of 7, Shabbat, multiple times. Wherefore he called the name of that place Be'er Shabbat, because they swear nishba'u, both of them, thus they made a covenant at the Be'er Shabbat. And that is, of course, significant for the reasons that Jennifer explained earlier, the mutual obligations, then the chesed that will be expected of both parties. Deborah Steinmetz notes, in Beersheba, Abraham establishes a covenant which, as Abimelech stipulates, will protect his children and grandchildren. That he hinges the covenant and the issue of the well on the issue of the well emphasizes this. In the preceding episode, his son Ishmael had been saved through the well in Beersheba, and soon after, Abraham establishes his lineage through Isaac by offering him as a sacrifice. He will return to Beersheba, the place which guarantees the continued protection of children. In fact, Beersheba will be established again later by Isaac after he attempts to restore his father's wells against the opposition of Abimelech's people, and as he in turn receives God's blessing of offspring. Beersheba will ultimately symbolize Abraham's continuity through Isaac. So here we really start to, again, see the function of the etiology. It helps us to see how these covenants that are made at these places then function within the larger scheme of the protection of Abraham and his posterity, how that line will be enabled to not only survive but flourish. Arguably, the most significant keyword in Genesis 22, the story of the Akedai, is the verb ra'ah. It was a key term in the story of Hagar and Ishmael and the theophany at and renaming of Be'er Lachai Roi. We heard a lot already about this from Dr. Rensburg and why that is the naming of this place, Adonai Yireh, is really significant for the future of the temple at this site. The narrator describes Abraham's and Isaac's obedience in going to the appointed place of sacrifice in Genesis 22, 3-4, when the verb ra'ah occurs for the first time of 5 times. And Abraham rose up early in the morning and saddled his ass and took 2 of his young men with him, and Isaac his son, and clave the wood for the burnt offering, and rose up and went to the place, El Hamakom. That's a significant word in terms of the future of that site, of which God had told him. Then on the 3rd day, Abraham lifted up his eyes and saw Vayar, the place, Et Hamakom, far off. The place, Hamakom, is a technical term, eventually came to denote the temple as the central sanctuary, and there are resonances of Makom as temple here as well. As they journey towards Moriah, Isaac questions his father about the sacrificial animal to be offered as a burnt offering. And Isaac spake unto Abraham his father and said, My father. And he said, Here am I, my son. And he said, Behold, the fire and the wood, but where is the lamb? Haseh, one of a flock for a burnt offering. Abraham's response contains the second use of ra'ah, and Abraham said, My son, God will provide himself. Yireh lo, literally see for himself, a lamb for a burnt offering. So they went, both of them, together. In the 3rd and 4th and 5th instances, the verb ra'ah in Genesis 22, Abraham sees with his own eyes something else that he'd already seen with an eye of faith. You can look back at JST Genesis 15 for that. And Abraham lifted up his eyes and looked, Vayar, and behold, behind him a ram caught in the thicket by the horns. And Abraham went and took the ram and offered him up as a burnt offering in the stead of Tachat, his son. And so this is important to the principle of the types of sacrifices that will be offered at this very location for uncounted times over many, 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 many years. And Abraham called the name of that place Shem Hamakom Hahu, Adonai Yireh, as it is said to this day, in the mount of Adonai it shall be seen. That place, named by Abraham, Adonai Yireh, will later become the place, the Hamakom of the Jerusalem temple, is the central sanctuary of the United Monarchy of Israel and later the Kingdom of Judah. Abraham's arrested sacrifice of Isaac, together with the arrested pestilence in Israel, in which David saw, again the same verb there, the theophanic angel by the threshing floor of Arana, and there build an altar, forms the etiological foundation of the Jerusalem temple on Mount Moriah, as Dr. Rensburg so nicely described earlier. In other words, the theophany and sacrifice became the etiological basis for the temple in ancient Israel, where worshipers could come and see their redemption depicted in the vicarious animal sacrifices offered on their behalf and in their stead, looking forward to the atonement of Jesus Christ and symbolizing the death of their animal or natural selves. The name Adonai Yireh properly denotes the Lord will see, the Lord sees, the Lord provides, or the Lord will provide. However, the etiological saying attached to this statement, Bahar Adonai Yera'eh, renders the verb ra'ah in the passive statement. Thus, the saying can mean, in the mount of Adonai, it abstractly shall be seen. In the mount of Adonai, he, Adonai, shall be seen. Or in the mount of Adonai, he, Adonai, shall be provided. In the mount, Adonai shall be seen, or simply in the mount, Adonai shall be provided. Not only did the events at Moriah or Adonai Yireh in Genesis 22 sacralize that place, but every sacrifice near and around that site ever since, most especially the sacrifice of Jesus Christ, the only begotten Son, typified by Isaac. Okay, we're running out of time, so I'm going to really cut to the chase really quick. So there we have attestations of names like Jacob, like in like Yaqub Har, but the etiology gives away in Genesis 25 and 27 a way to see why the name Jacob becomes significant spiritually for Israel. You're probably familiar with a lot of these. The grabbing of the heel in the womb by Jacob, his later supplanting or usurping his brother. Later, Genesis 28, we've got the etiology for Beit El. That doesn't necessarily mean that there wasn't a Bet El here or near this site before this, but the whole story here gives an explanation for why it is worthy of that name going forward. Not only does Jacob describe this place as a temple using architectural terms, but he sees the heavenly hosts at the site coming up and down on the salam there, and that is sort of foreshadowing of Jacob's own posterity, his own family, the family of God that he sees will be as typological of his own family. We've got Jacob at the Jabbok wrestling. I've written on this a lot, and so we can probably just cut to the chase with this as well. The verb Vayevek, which plays not only on the name Yaakov but also on Yabok as a place name, and then Jacob getting the new name Yisrael. But for as a prince thou hast had power, or another way of rendering this, or you have struggled with God, you've struggled with divine beings and with men. The fraternal struggle turns to a situation where Jacob uses theophanic language that will later be used to describe appearances of Jehovah, or coming from the south or the east. Sarna notes the name Peniel may already have belonged to the site due to some grotesque rock formation. A promontory on the Phoenician coast that contained the profile of a monstrous face was called God's face. Whatever the origin of the name in our text, it invested it with new meaning from Jacob's experience. The etiological report for Peniel in Genesis 32 points to a secondary non-etymological etiology or midrash meaning for Israel in terms of Ish Ra'el, man who has seen God. And then finally we get Jacob, Genesis 33. Why Hebekahu, wrestling becomes embracing. And yeah, that's one of my favorite passages, just with how loaded it is with wordplay and symbolism. It's beautiful. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Matt. It's just loaded with beautiful wordplay. Would you care to say anything about wordplay in general, how it's enriched your understanding and appreciation for the scriptures?
Yeah, one of the things that it's helped me, I had one of my first classes in my PhD program was from a scholar named Michael Patrick O'Connor. Anyone who's done any work in Hebrew poetry will know who he is. But one of the things he did was really helped us get a sense of what good wordplay was. He'd start with headlines from newspapers, and all of us, I think this goes back to Dr. Rensburg's presentation earlier. We not only like good stories, but we like good stories that are told in a really good way. They're told well. I'm thinking of a really recent example. At least I've been following. I've been a Star Wars fan for a long time. Some of those stories are told better than others. But when it can be told in a really, really effective way, it changes the experience into something very different, right? And I don't know how anybody who can read even Genesis in translation can come away with not seeing what a marvelous text it is, how beautiful and how beautifully told the stories are. And it's even more beautiful when you read it in Hebrew. And that's when you really see some of the literary artistry at work on the word level. And of course, a lot of the onomastic word plays really make it memorable for an ancient audience. We sort of assume that sometimes when we read Genesis that these names were invented on the spot for the particular, out of the situation. But names like Ishmael, we have attestations of that name from all over the ancient Near East. Some of these names were common names, but they become within the context of the story and with the beautiful way in which they're incorporated into the narrative, they become even more beautiful and significant. And so I maybe lost the plot on the original question, but that's how
That's good. So anyway, yeah, it's clear you answered the question. It makes the text more meaningful, more beautiful, and in some sense more true.
And yeah, it's more than about just being beautiful. You know, it's not just what Ars Amacorum is. I'm remembering that right. It's not just beauty for beauty's sake. It's they're telling the narratives that were the most sacred to them, and in the best way that they could be told. And that's one of the reasons Genesis is one of my favorite books of scripture.
I go with Keats. Truth is beauty and beauty is truth. And I think you can't extricate them one from another. Certainly Genesis is an exemplary of that. So there's a couple of questions about specific terms that maybe you've explored, maybe you haven't. What about the name of Hagar?
Yeah,
that's
you
commented on.
Well, a lot of the work that's been done on that focuses on the phonetic similarity between Hagar and Ger, and the concept of being a sojourner. It's hard to say. It doesn't get etiologized, or so the writer's not giving us a explicit hint or explicit explanation for how the writer's viewing the name, but there are maybe hints of that kind of connection. There have been other proposals for Hagar's name. She's given as, or her origin is explained in Egypt. Maybe, but even Egyptian etymological proposals have defied, at least so far, really satisfying or conclusive explanations.
Here's another anomaly that way. We have all kinds of plays on hearing, right? Starting with Ishmael. Why is it we don't have anything similar for seeing, Ra? Why doesn't that show up, do you think? For wordplay, for the verb to see, since we've had the verb, to hear so prominent in the stories. Why don't we see the same kind of wordplay, I guess, in names in particular, as life words in the book of Genesis?
For the verb to see?
Yes.
Well, we do have the
well,
and then Adonai Yireh. I mean, that's the both of those are built. But what was interesting, going back to last week, I saw in a new way, I think from a couple of the presentations, David and Avram, the importance in the book of Abraham of in the Genesis account, or the creation account there, you have a move from the Hebrew tov. You've got things being obedient or very obedient, which brings us back to Shema, and then the importance of the verb to see in that account is really significant. So, before those presentations were given, that hadn't really clicked with me.
Super cool. Somebody would like you to comment on, and maybe this is a general question, just for people who may not be familiar with using Adonai in as a substitute for the Tetragrammaton, and they just wanted you to comment on your use of the word Adonai there, and maybe that's a good thing for people to know.
Well, that part of that's just that's how we read when we would read Hebrew in Hebrew classes. That sort of started here for me with Stephen's class and Don's classes.
But that's not uncommon, I think.
No, and Dr. Rensburg could speak more to that as well. I think in SBL settings, I've noticed that depending on the audience, people try to be a little bit more circumspect about that in some cases not. But
okay.
Yeah, I guess it's just sometimes it's easier to just say Adonai than try to use some reconstruction of the divine name that probably is not historically correct anyway. So,
and certainly it shows respect in some cases, in some audiences. Somebody asked the question: is chesed, of course, which we just heard about from Jennifer, and hesef or lamb related etymologically? I don't think there's anything there.
No, there's no relation.
So it's just a coincidence that your talks followed each other. Okay. I think that's pretty much what we have, and we thank you for that presentation. We encourage everybody to read the paper, which has the details on some of the excellent things that he only sampled here today. So thank you, Matt. And we'll rejoin you all at 1:00.